Hey everyone, I hope that you had a Merry Christmas. I don't know about you, but during the holidays, or after the holidays, I always feel like I'm in a bit of a slump because Christmas is always so much fun, and then I think, wow, that went by fast, and I'm always sad that it's over. But this year, I really don't feel that because this interview has been on the calendar for a few weeks. I'm so excited to be joined in studio today by Monica Harris. Monica is the author of this great book that I read called The Illusion of Division, and some of you may remember that she was on the show a few weeks ago. She told me that she would be in LA, so I seized on the opportunity to talk with her face to face again. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless and the Julie Hartman YouTube channel in general. Just as a reminder that in addition to Timeless, you can catch my show with Dennis Prager, which premieres every Monday on this channel at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. It is aptly called Dennis and Julie. And then, of course, Timeless is Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays on this channel. And in case you don't want to watch, you can listen to it on Apple and Spotify and anywhere you get your podcasts. As I said, I'm so excited that Monica Harris is here. I'm about to give your intro, but I feel like we can even just scrap it and dive right in
because...
Go
ahead and give the intro for folks who don't know.
Yes, well, exactly. But for those of you who don't know, you should go back and watch the interview that we did a few weeks ago.
You could do that.
But for those of you who didn't see it, Monica Harris is an author and lawyer. After 20 years of working in the corporate world, Monica decided to make a bold life change, which led to her writing this book, The Illusion of Division. Monica now lives in Montana and she operates her own law firm, and she also has a blog called Let's Get Unplugged, which you can find at the aptly named letsgetunplugged.com. Monica also serves as the executive director of the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, which we'll be definitely discussing today because we were going to do it last time, but we just got chatting.
We just kept.
And then before I knew it, Sean was saying to me, we got to wrap up.
Yeah.
So welcome, Monica. Thank you for being here.
It is wonderful to be here, Julie. Such a pleasure. I always love talking to you and getting into our cocktail conversation.
Yes, that's what Monica said to me before the last interview. She said, I'm cocktail casual, and I thought I love that.
That's right, like just chatting with you at a party. You
know, I've learned that over the past year of doing this job. I think I used to be very stiff and had all my questions prepared. And it's so much better when, as we were saying before this, you just forget that the microphone is there.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes it can get you into a little bit of trouble, but that's always the goal.
Totally.
So, gosh, I don't even know where to dive in. I told Monica I have 3 things written down from last time. We've talked about class.
Yep.
We've talked about excellent sheep.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have to talk about fair.
Got to talk about fair.
But first, so you're in LA visiting family, right?
Yes.
And so you live in Montana. How often do you come here and visit, or do you stay in Montana most of the time?
I would say before the pandemic. So I'm an entertainment lawyer by profession,
Mm-hmm.
but most of my clients, as you can imagine, aren't in Montana. They're
Yeah.
in LA. They're some in New York, but mostly in LA. Before the pandemic started, I would come out maybe like every 3 or 4 months, and I got to admit, it was not pleasurable. I mean, LA's changed a lot. It's not the place I remember. Even before I left, it wasn't a place I was wild about. But you know what's happened like in the past decade. It's changed so much. Exactly. So many ways, so many levels. So before the pandemic, I was coming out a lot more often. But pandemic hits, and the only silver lining, the only good thing to come out of the pandemic, in my opinion, is everyone's on Zoom. It's such a familiarity with working remotely. So I have been working remotely for like about almost a decade now. And it was a little unusual, but post-pandemic, it became more the custom, the norm. So now I don't have to come to LA like maybe once a year. Now, our family, my partner, her family's still in Southern California too. My folks are in Southern California. So we still come to see our family like maybe a couple times a year and try to weave some work in there. But generally speaking, I would say our trips are becoming fewer and far between, and more expensive too. I mean, who can afford to come here?
I know.
It's crazy.
Well, the reason why I asked, and you just hit on it in your answer, is that I can imagine once you've become accustomed to the beautiful Montana unplugged lifestyle,
totally simple lifestyle,
right? Coming
yes.
back here must kind of be like, oh, maybe we've left that in the past and should stick to Montana. I don't know.
No, I mean, look, this is exactly what we were dealing with. Like when we first moved, you can imagine you're coming from this huge city, and to a little town of like maybe it's 3,500 people pre-pandemic, maybe 5,000 now. But it's a completely different way of life. And it took some adjustment because you don't have all the bells and whistles. You don't have a big mall. I mean, your life is pretty much an Amazon if you want anything, right? No ethnic restaurants to speak of, except maybe a Mexican restaurant. So your options are pretty limited, and you learn to just do with less, and you sort of focus on what you need, not on what you want. And that was initially, I think, kind of uncomfortable. And there was more of sort of a yearning to visit California in those early years, get back to what we knew and the familiar, and like, oh, look at everything we have. And that was sort of wistful. But as time went by, as my partner and I always like to say, California changed and we changed, and we found ourselves moving in different directions. So I would say about 5 years into our relocation, we started to not want to visit California as much. We'd come back and we're like, don't like what's happened here. Oh my God, look at all these homeless people. Or, wow, I mean, why are we paying this much for a cappuccino? And we come back to Montana and we feel like, oh wow, this feels a lot better. I think we made the smart choice. And the choice has just been, it's just felt smarter with every passing year. And then post-pandemic, it's just like, I can't believe we ever lived here. It's just almost unrecognizable. So a lot of people say, were you psychic? You guys are like really smart to move. No, I think we were just following our hearts.
Take credit for it. So
no,
yeah, apparently
no, we're not. No, can't take credit for that. We were just following our hearts, and it's just a gamble that paid off. I think that's the best way to put it.
I want to make clear to the audience that this is kind of the basis of Monica's book. The fact that you were here in LA, you were working in corporate entertainment law. In the grind. Yeah. And you decided to go with your partner and your son to Montana. And I love this story because I love when people kind of reveal something that shakes up your expectations of what it would be like.
Yeah.
And you talked about how when you told people that you were moving to Montana, they said to you, oh my gosh, they hate black people in Montana.
They hate Republicans.
Yeah, they're all white supremacist Republicans. They hate gay people. And you went and wrote this great book, The Illusion of Division, that so many of these divisions that we focus so much on and that are frothed up in this country, not just, race and sexuality, but, vaccinated versus unvaccinated status, the way you vote. You say that a lot of it is an illusion, and we actually have way more in common.
Distortions of our reality is the way I like to put it. I think that's been the most unexpected discovery, is that it feels to me, and more, that there's been this distortion of our reality on many different levels. And this distortion has led us to make, or maybe the distortion is as a result of, these assumptions that we're making about people we've never met, we've never actually spent time with, or don't know much about at all. We're making these assumptions based on what other people we trust, people in the media, influencers, maybe politicians or elected leaders we trust. They present this perception of reality. And if we believe the perception, then the reality that they're presenting becomes our reality. So I think what I've learned over the past decade or so is that reality is very malleable. It is whatever we create or we allow other people to create for us. And I think that right now we are living in a manufactured reality that's created an artificial sense of division, sense of division that, absent other forces, absent the media, absent what we're hearing on social media, absent what party leaders are telling us, we would soon realize that we have so much more in common than we think. What holds us back is that so many people that I meet on the left and the right are unwilling to take a chance. Like, we took a chance. We left a blue bubble. And
Boy, did you take a chance.
Yeah, we went to a place that's 90%, white, very Republican, very heterosexual. And I think it defied our expectations, and we were rewarded for that, taking that chance, because we saw, oh my God, this is not the reality that we were presented. This is a completely different reality. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people in Montana who would probably match the assumption that a lot of folks in blue states, have. I can't say that we've never met anyone who's not racist. Not overtly racist, but, the kind of people who, really don't want to have much to do with you, give you a kind of look that, makes you feel like you don't really belong here. But my point is, those encounters are few and far between. And what I would encourage people to do is, instead of just assuming that people are going to treat you a certain way if you go to a certain place, take a chance, open yourself up, and embrace the adventure. And I think you will be surprised by what you experience. I think you'll find that people that you fear aren't nearly as scary as you think. And I also feel that there are forces in our country that are invested in making us believe that we don't have a lot in common. And that probably goes to your question about class. You know, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was a very different experience for a young black woman. I would go into a store in West LA on rare occasions with my mom, and we would be followed around by shopkeepers. You know, I think they genuinely thought that we would, we'd steal something. I often, as I said in my book, I went to a private school in Pasadena that's literally a stone's throw here from your studio. Extremely wealthy families. And when I graduated in my senior year, our party was held at the Jonathan Club in Malibu. And at the time, 1984, there were only white people allowed into the club, not Jews, not Asians,
God,
not
in
Latinos.
1984?
Yes,
Wow.
1984. Tom Bradley
40
was
years
mayor.
ago.
Black, yeah, exactly. This isn't like, Jim Crow, like 50 years ago. It's only 1984.
And in LA.
And in LA, a progressive city.
Right.
So, people wouldn't expect that. But they had to get a special dispensation to let anyone but a WASP into that club. So I know I have a very visceral feeling and experience with racism that a lot of people here, a lot of people now, they talk about microaggressions. This was truly a macroaggression. It was horrible. And this is the life that I think a lot of black people in my generation experience. But it's changed. It's changed significantly over the years. The fact that I was like a gay black woman running a business affairs department at VH1, that would not have happened in 1984. It probably wouldn't have even happened in 1990 when I was at a law firm and I'm sitting there with 3 black women in my office and the white partner walks by, does a double take and says, "What are you guys doing, plotting a revolution?" That stuff would not even happen. You just can't even imagine happening. So I've seen so much progress, and I think the danger we face is that we forget the progress we've made. And a lot of people of color, particularly black people, are captured in this mindset of like, well, we have so much further to go. We're still not entirely equal. There's still some disparity. They forget that, what life used to be like for our parents and our grandparents. My mom, who grew up in Memphis and who wasn't allowed to get on the bus with white students, who had to sit in the colored person section of the local theater when she wanted to watch, far from the fire exit. This was the life we lived. And now we've progressed and we're living lives that are so much similar in so many ways and so many more opportunities than we've had. And we can't see that the biggest thing that's dividing us now isn't race. What's really dividing us is class. When I went to Montana, I had never seen so many poor white people in my life. My son went to school with kids who, they had like one of his friends, their family had like been evicted and they were living in their car, like at some point. He was invited to a birthday party of one of his friends, young white boy, and had a great time at the party. It was in a trailer park. First time I'd really actually gone into a double wide. Mm-hmm. And we're like walking out and we look at the bottom of we're like, what is that smell? And we look at the bottom of our shoes and, there's like dog crap on it. And it didn't come from the yard. It was actually in my son's friend's home. So that's true poverty. And it's not unusual in Montana. There's a lot of wealth there. But like I said, there's a lot, not in a state that's 90% white, there's a lot of people who are dying, a lot of kids who are dying from fentanyl. The fentanyl crisis is real there. There's the suicide rate there is higher than any other state in the country. Just a lot of folks who are struggling. And it hit me that if these people are struggling and they're not black, then there's something else going on. they're struggling for other reasons. And that's when I began to pay more attention to not systemic racism, but systemic classism. These are the factors that are keeping people of all races from getting ahead and achieving the American dream that was possible for me as a black woman. I mean, I went to Princeton and Harvard, like you said. I can count on three fingers, the number of people in Montana that I know who can afford to send their kids to Princeton or Harvard. And they're white. But it's not an option for them. It's done. So is it racism? No. There's something bigger going on here.
So much to respond to. By the way, I'm realizing I'm clutching onto your book.
Clutching.
I want to put it here so everybody can see. It's just such a good book.
You might want to leave.
I want to hold it. So much to say, but I'm really glad that you brought up this last point about how many middle class and certainly lower class families in the United States can't afford to send their kids to Ivy League schools. Because when I went to Harvard, and I just graduated a year and a half ago, and I'd be so curious.
A year and a half ago, wow.
I know. Well, it's going by. I already feel so old. When I passed the year mark, it was cool to be able to go, oh, less than a year ago. Because then it felt like, if I'm, making mistakes in life, I can say I'm still fresh out of college. I'm not fresh out of college anymore, but putting that aside, when I went to Harvard, I was really expecting to meet all different kinds of people. Yeah. And in a way I did. Mm-hmm. One of my best friends in the world, my roommate is from Kazakhstan. My other senior year roommate was from Kenya. Yeah. I met friends from all over the world. I can't say that ideologically there was a lot of diversity, sure, but internationally there was. But there was very little class diversity. Yes. There were a ton of people who were extremely wealthy, definitely upper class. Yes. But there was no, and then you'd have some people who had these crazy, really miraculous, amazing stories, like, they grew up homeless and then they, got a scholarship and came to Harvard. So you'd kind of have these two extremes, but there was no middle class. Did you find that when you were at Princeton?
I did find that, and I what surprised me, because I've been tracking the student body at Princeton and Harvard Law over the years, and it seems to me that this dynamic you're talking about has been accelerating, because I was from the middle class. Actually, I was from the working class, and there were some, and particularly black folks, that were like me from the working class, and some white also. But and there was a chunk in the middle class. But over time, it seems that as tuition has gotten more expensive, obviously, there's I think there were studies done that at Princeton, 60% of in my cohort, 60% of the student body came from the upper middle class, but I think now it's something like 78 or 80% are from the upper middle class. I forget the stats, but it's exactly what you're pointing to, is that Princeton used to be, and I think Harvard as well, used to be institutions that were open to a broad range of classes, even though heavily weighted towards the upper middle class. But it seems to be almost futile now that there really is just those very few, a handful of folks who may have gotten basketball scholarships or music scholarships or things like that, or maybe an academic. Look, talking about the academic scholarship, again, coming from the working class, I got a scholarship because I wanted to be pre-med. It was like $4,000, which was a lot back then in 1984. So my parents were elated. They're like, $4,000 off tuition. The tuition was like all of I think 16, which seemed like a lot then, not so much now. But they're like, oh, we only have to pay 12. Well, what Princeton did, they actually reduced a grant that I had. So literally they reduced it by $4,000. So again, it was a wash. So it did me no good to get the scholarship. So what I found by talking to a lot of kids there is you had to be exceptionally poor, not just poor. It's interesting. You think the miraculous stories of people who were homeless.
So extreme.
Yeah, so extreme. So the middle class folks like me from these families, we could not catch a break because there was almost no way for us to reduce our tuition we just had to get loans. So I was loaned up completely when I came out of Princeton, loaned up out of Harvard Law School. So, this goes to the issue of class, because even though I had these degrees, I was on a completely different footing than my white peers who, they graduated with no loans. Totally cash paid. I don't know your situation, but they were totally cash paid. I was in debt for something like easily 150,000. But again, this was in like 1991, like college and law school. You try getting your foot in this world, even like with a pretty decent job at a corporate law firm, you try starting out with that much debt and trying to catch up. You're always behind the eight ball. So it is, the class issue is very real. And it's not just for black people. There were lots of white people, in the middle class, not a lot, but there were a good number of white people who were also in the same situation. And now I was just talking to my partner the other day about like how much it would take if our son wanted to go to college, incidentally, even if he could get into Harvard, we would never send him there. I mean, there's no...
Oh, we got to talk about that.
Brainwashed, yeah. But, it would be something like $350,000 for Princeton, and another $500,000 for law school. Like, we're looking at almost $1 million. Who can afford that? So anyway, again, I've come up a couple of notches in terms of class, and yet I still can't afford to send my kids to the... Yeah.
It is truly crazy. And I think you are absolutely right. I mean, no doubt the biggest component of this is financial. Yeah. That people in the middle class, and as you say, even upper class, it is backbreaking to be able to afford to go to these institutions. But I also think there's another reason why you don't see as many middle class students at Harvard. I think it's because from an admissions officer's point of view, there's nothing that quote unquote extraordinary about these individuals.
Interesting.
Because as I said, we have these extremes. You have the miracle story of people who grew up with very little means and then fought their way, God bless them, to get to a place like Harvard. Yeah. And then, you have the people on the other end who've had every advantage and have made the most out of, those advantages and scored, done incredibly well academically or sports-wise or in music, et cetera. But then there are these people in the middle class who, and I think there's this greater scorn for these individuals in America. They're middle America, overwhelmingly white, Christian. These have become like dirty words. People, and they go to school and they do well, and they go home and they go to their church and they maybe volunteer at their church. Big deal.
Yeah.
What's the story?
Yeah.
I think, and I could be totally wrong. It's totally my speculation.
Well, I mean, I think that would fit into, I never thought about that, but I think you might be onto something. It might fit into this idea of schools have started to glorify people who are oppressed.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Who are typically very diverse. And I think that people that you described, the classic folks in Middle America, and I would say black or white. I mean, the people, what you just described, would certainly fit for my family. Like my folks worked for the county. My dad was a sheriff, LA County Sheriff. My mother was like a child support representative. So they're just solidly in the middle. Nothing extraordinary about them. But they weren't oppressed. They weren't victims. They were people who worked extremely hard, had a solid moral grounding. My mother was and still is very religious. My father not so much, but and they didn't want handouts. And they would be, I think, insulted if you even looked at them and assumed that they were victims. Interesting story. So I went to this school, Pasadena Poly, like I said, private school not far from here.
I swam there all the time.
You saw, okay, you know it. Nice, nice school.
Very nice.
So
good pool.
Yeah, good pool.
That's the extent to which I know it.
So this was like, again, in the 80s, and tuition was like, it was like $4,000 or $5,000 a year, which was a lot back then, especially for people who had county jobs.
Right.
My parents were approached by the administrators, and they're like, you know what, we really want Monica to come here. We want her to come so much, because this was a time when they were like, they were really trying to like roll out the carpet to, this is the beginning of like the affirmative action era, So we want Monica to come. I aced all the tests, and they really wanted me. And they were willing to give me a scholarship. Not a full ride, but 50%. My mother wanted to take it, and my father said, no, not going to do it because we don't want the handouts. We don't want to owe them anything. We don't want anyone to see you as a pity case. And so my father and my mom took out loans, and my dad worked a second job, but did all that because, and you think about it, I don't think it's something a lot of people would do today, because everyone's looking for, hey, what can I get for free? What can I get without working for it? So anyway, all in the way of saying that a lot of people in the middle class that you're describing are from that same I'm not a victim mentality.
Yes.
I work for
Yes.
I want to feel that I'm rewarded for the work I do. And I don't think that that's something that these schools value now. I don't think that's a mentality that they value now.
See, as you were talking, I was thinking about like the perspective essay from someone in the middle class that they would write to Harvard or the Common App, whatever.
Yeah, right.
It's only been 5 years. I can't remember what's the forum you write these essays.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, like, what would a middle class American write versus what would, someone who's really trying to put forth, the story write? And it's like, if you write you get rewarded for these sensational stories, and then people contrive them, And again, as you were saying earlier, I, of course, know that racism and homophobia and all these things exist. Yeah. By the way, I am steeped in this conservative world. I've never met a conservative who denies the existence of these things. It's
crazy.
It's insane. It's like, I mean, there are so many myths about conservatives, but that's the biggest one. Like somehow, people who are conservative deny the existence of racism. Of course there's racism, but
that they're all pro-life.
Right. Yeah. But, I see often, and I would see this in college, people contriving these grievances and these narratives of horrible things that have happened, and then you think back to the way that these college essays are structured, like talk about the most impactful thing in your life, and people use that as the opportunity to sell this big story. And if you're a middle class American who, as you're saying, doesn't, view themselves as a victim, has bourgeoisie values, is a church-going kind of regular, I think in the best sense, person, and you don't think in terms of concocting that sensational story, are you going to be rewarded for your essay?
So.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so. Now, see, I feel like I'm dating myself again, because when I was at this private school at Pasadena Poly, we had a college counselor. I'll never forget her. Her name was Dawn Cobb. Wonderful woman.
Mine was named Monica.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
And I accidentally one time called her Momica.
Momica. Wait,
she was like my school mom.
So you went to school in the Palisades? Okay.
No, I didn't. I went to school in Hancock Park.
Oh, Hancock.
Yeah.
Which was
Marlboro.
Marlboro. Oh my God. Okay.
Did you swim there too?
No, I did not swim. But it's interesting. A Latin club, and we had some competitions with Marlboro. Anyway, so our college counselor, the thing that she would always tell us is, you want to be well-rounded in your application. That was what was, you had to have killer SATs. That was really good too. But being well-rounded and being incredibly diverse, in the way we're not talking about diversity now, but diverse in terms of like the classes you took, your extracurricular activity. It was all about the extracurricular activities. Be on the student body. I was student body president my sophomore year. I managed to get that in an all-white school. Imagine that, or almost all-white school. I was an American Field Service student to the Dominican Republic when I was a junior. I took a lot of AP. I stood out because most of my classmates were taking like 5 or 6 courses. I took 7 courses, and 3 of them were AP. I was trying to just really spread myself out there and do I competed in essay contests. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to make myself as interesting as possible and to have all these different facets of my personality that I was presenting. And I don't know what the criteria for essays are now. I suspect you're probably right. But what I chose to write my essay for Princeton and all this colleges work on was my trip to the Dominican Republic. And it's an experience I write about in this book, where I made the closest friend, the best friend I made in youth before I went to college was, a young woman from Virginia who I've since lost touch with, but we were I think I may have had a crush on her too, to be honest. But we came from completely different worlds, Mm-hmm. And she was a Southerner. I was just like this black girl from LA, and we had nothing in common, but in those 2.5 or 3 months in the Dominican Republic, the one thing we did have in common was that we were Americans thrown into this completely foreign place, with limited knowledge of Spanish. Our Spanish is like, like broken high school Spanish. And, we had the same love for pop culture. We were both really into the Police. MTV was just coming out at that time. We were both like really into music videos. We were both missing the same things about home. We were both talking about like our dreams. She was getting ready to go to UVA. Oh, well, she didn't know what UVA at the time, but that was her dream. I was dreaming of the Ivy Leagues. We were talking about like what we hoped college was going to be like, and we wanted to. We were bonding about the things that made us human.
Yes.
And that was what I wrote my essay about, like just this idea of like coming together with people from different cultures and different just demographics and finding out that, God, you have so much in common. So it's funny, you didn't even really think about it until just now, but even as a kid, I was like sort of like open to this idea of what do we have in common? What can we do to bring ourselves closer to each other instead of, finding things that separate us? And I don't think that that's something that is emphasized strongly enough in schools now. That comes with that comes with an appreciation for true diversity.
True diversity.
Authentic diversity that schools don't embrace anymore.
I want to talk about your excellent sheep thesis because I related to it so much. We were just saying
it's not mine. William Deresiewicz.
Well, yes, that's right.
Yes,
I read his book.
Him.
Yes. He was a God. I always get his name wrong. I'm glad you said it.
I think it's William Deresiewicz.
I always say Deresiewicz.
Okay,
but
close.
No. I'm going to go with Monica. But he wrote this. For those who are unaware, he wrote this great book, Excellent Sheep, and he was a Yale undergraduate admissions officer, and
a professor of English, I think.
Yes.
I think
yes. And he wrote about how a lot of the people who were applying and then the people who matriculated were these, what he called excellent sheep, in that they kind of followed the right trajectory. And I really related to that.
Oh my God,
We were talking off the air. I often say, everyone, to my guests, I say we should stop talking because the best stuff is off the air and then I wish it were recorded. This is one such instance. We were talking about, I said to you, I feel like I was an excellent sheep. And you said, you too. And what did you say? We've grazed away from the herd.
We've grazed away, yeah. We we couldn't have made it through Harvard and Princeton if we weren't excellent sheep.
Yes.
And so, for years, I'd had this theory that before I read the book, I'm like, there's something wrong with the way that I was taught to think in college. And it took me a while to really appreciate what the problem was. And it started to manifest in the corporate world where I met other people who were from these really nice colleges and law schools. And it occurred to me that, they're just really high-achieving followers. They're supposed to be leaders, but they're really not thinking like leaders. They're thinking, they're not just thinking inside the box. They refuse to look at the fact that the box is fallen apart, or like, why is the box even there? Forget the box. And the box to me is like a sort of a metaphor for the system,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when I read his book, just back up again. So I had this idea when I was, I thought, like, it's weird. When I was in college, I would study for exams. But the exams I did the best on, and this is particularly true of law school, the exams I did the best on was when I just mimicked what the professor told me in class. So you'd read a book, you'd read a textbook, and you'd have the class discussions. You may have your own sort of take on what you read, but you'd have the class discussion, and it would be very clear what the professor thought. He'd sort of like toss out a question, get some answers. You could see some answers, the answers that some students gave, he sort of poo-pooed or rejected or didn't follow through. But others he really resonated with, and he pursued those. And you're like, oh, that's what you want to hear. And then you take notes. That would be bolded, underlined, because when you're in college, I'm just going to be perfectly frank, and especially at Ivy League schools, it's all about the GPA.
Oh,
because the
course.
GPA is what gets you to law school or business
the
school or
next
med school.
stepping
the next
stone.
You've got to.
Yes.
It's all about achieving.
Total. Oh, gosh.
Right.
We could talk for hours about this.
You do not want to risk your GPA on a course that may even get you a B. You need some. You may take a chance on a course that gets you a B+, but you're looking for A- as A's. You want to rock out that GPA. Anyway, so it makes you very risk averse for one thing. And when you're risk averse, it means you don't want to go against whatever the professor's narrative is. That's essentially what it is, a narrative. So we were essentially like, I trained myself to regurgitate what I was, like a baby bird, like, regurgitate what you're told.
That's a visual I won't be
That's
able to get out of my head.
Intellectual regurgitation.
Yep.
And years later, it occurred to me, like, I was getting really good grades, but was I really using critical thinking skills? Was I really I wasn't thinking out of the box. I was like, this was the box. I was told what to put in the box. I'm like, I can put the stuff in the box. Really, here's the box. Yeah, and you're rewarded for that. And that's not, unfortunately, and I don't know if many people who did go to these schools realize, a lot of people trust these really well-groomed folks from elite schools because they think they're so smart, they think they're experts, they think that they're critical thinkers, they think that they're smarter than they are because they went to these schools. But that's not the case. In fact, I have noticed in recent years that there's actually a direct inverse relationship between the amount of education you have and the amount of common sense you have and your ability to, solve problems and to be resourceful and to use critical thinking, just the common sense. And people the people from elite institutions they don't have that because they're just regurgitating. And
totally. Like the baby bird.
Like the baby bird. And
No,
we're being misled into thinking these people know what they're doing, and in many cases they're just regurgitating from what someone else has said, whether it's maybe folks in the media or maybe even like people higher up the food chain. They're just regurgitating narratives.
Yes. I have started to say, I no longer refer to people who went to these, Ivy League undergraduate colleges and law schools and business schools. I no longer refer to them as educated. I refer to them as credentialed.
That
there's
makes
a
so much
difference.
more sense. Yes.
There is such a difference between being educated and credentialed.
Yes.
You can be very, very, very educated and have no credentials, or you can have a lot of credentials and not be very educated. So I've started to use that.
Yes.
I think we may have talked about this. I don't think so, though, when we were last talking just about a month ago. But when I was a senior in college, wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal called "Harvard Students Are COVID Sheep." So I didn't exactly mince my words.
Yes.
I wasn't subtle. And I graduated in 2022. And we had... So I was sent home from college in the middle of my sophomore year which was 2020.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I was liberal, and that's when I became conservative because it was the whole Black Lives Matter riot summer, it was the whole COVID summer. Oh yeah, that was quite a summer. And that's how I found Dennis Prager, and it was a whole journey. It was a wild few months, but changed my life. It brought me right here. Before we continue, I want to tell you about MyPillow. I use many MyPillow products. I walk into work every day wearing the My slippers, and then I quickly change into heels. I sleep on the MyPillow in the Giza Dream bed sheets, and I use My towels, among other products. And you can get many of these products at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman. MyPillow's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you'll get 60% off of the aforementioned Giza Dream bed sheets. That comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll get a set for as low as $39.99 with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Along with this offer, you'll get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, the MyPillow towel sets, and more. But I was sent home due to the COVID lockdowns when I was a sophomore. My entire junior year, I lost. I wasn't allowed to go back to campus because of how, apparently threatening COVID was to people my age. I lost my entire junior year at Harvard.
Where did you study then?
Zoom school.
You Zoomed Harvard, your third year of Harvard?
Yes, I Zoomed my entire junior year of Harvard. I didn't step foot on
full
campus.
Tuition?
Oh, increase. 2% increase.
Oh my God.
I know, it was insane. And so then we get back senior year, and I'm like, when I got back senior year, Monica, I was like, and I'm very, I'm studious, I'm focused. I'm like, I am gonna like jump from the roofs. I'm gonna party. It's my last year of college. I missed a third of my Harvard experience to do this. I was so excited to just go off.
Yeah.
And we had these crazy COVID restrictions. Even when I was back for my senior year, we had to wear masks everywhere we went, but they were irrational. Like when you were getting food in the dining hall, you had to wear your masks. But then when you sat to take it off, you could take off the mask. And it was like, oh, does COVID only live where the food is? It doesn't live where you eat? Like, it's crazy. And then it was like, you can only have 10 people with a mask in your room, but then you'd be in these lecture halls with all these people where it was uneven. And and I actually got in trouble with my opera teacher because I had the audacity to blow my nose one time.
Behind your mask?
I took down my mask and blew my nose. And I was just like, screw this. Pardon me, everyone, but screw this. I was so mad. But the thing that made me more disheartened than the irrational COVID restrictions themselves was the reaction of the student body.
Or non-reaction.
The non-reaction. Yeah. And I wrote in the journal, I said, we had this zombie-like acquiescence to these COVID restrictions. We all knew they made no sense. We all wanted to have fun our senior year.
Did you really know? I mean, did you talk to people?
I would. And so I went on this expedition where I would talk. I mean, I was very vocal about what I thought. And I'd go up to people and I'd go, what do you think about this? And they go, yeah, it's crazy, but whatever. And there was this weird resignation. And I was thinking, wow, where's your fire? Like, where's your anger? This is our final year in the case of my fellow seniors. Why aren't you upset? And I realized, and this is what I wrote in the article, is that we have just followed the path, and we have always done exactly what the adults wanted us to do.
To succeed.
Yeah. We regurgitated it for the third time like the baby bird, we'll acquiesce to the COVID restrictions. I'll write exactly on the paper what you want me to write. And I thought this a lot in high school. I mean, I had no social life. I studied. All I did was swim to get into college. And I realized we just view this as another thing that we've got to, march in lockstep to in order to attain our next credential and please the adults.
That's how tall it is,
And so you're right that many of these individuals are not leaders. They're followers, and they have to be followers to get into and maintain their status at these universities and advance to the next stepping stone.
Really disciplined followers. They can't be sloppy followers. They have to be counted upon to just stay lockstep. And it's, I there was no COVID, obviously, when I went to school. There was no Black Lives Matter. But I can see, looking back now, the bigger picture. And let me just also say, I don't think that this is historically the way students were educated and groomed at Harvard and other Ivy League institutions.
Yeah, when did it change, do you think, and why?
I don't know why it changed. I mean, I won't venture into conspiracy theories about why. I just, looking back, though, I can see that what I was experiencing laid the groundwork for what's happening now. When you have a group of people who aren't thinking outside the box and aren't asking questions like you're talking about, they're not pressing their professors. They're not willing to challenge their professors. They're not willing to give answers on an exam that deviate from what they know will be accepted. Then they're setting themselves up not just for a sort of like academic indoctrination, but social indoctrination too. And I think that's where Black Lives Matter comes in. They're letting these institutions sort of like determine how they react to anything in life, whether it's COVID or to a social disruption or a socioeconomic disruption or police brutality, anything, something along those lines. So I think that it's interesting you said that your peers would notice that there's something wrong, but they would just go along with it and they wouldn't feel free to challenge.
It was creepy.
But yet, I guess I'm just guessing. You may not have been around them during the Black Lives Matter movement. You were probably, you weren't on campus then, were you? Or were you there?
I was not on campus.
You were not on campus.
It was that summer we were.
It was that summer.
Home. Yeah.
But I bet you those same people were riled up enough to go out and march in the streets
because the adults told them to be.
Because the adults told them. So they're being trained how to react to situations. So it's very zombie-like. They can, and like you said, it's really, really frightening. You would expect this. Not that it's right, but you would expect this from people at the lowest levels of society. And when I mean the lowest levels, people who aren't expected to lead, people who are supposed to be followers. I mean, every society has to have leaders, and there has to be people who follow them.
Right.
Absolutely. So you would
Right.
expect followers in that class to behave this way. What's shocking is when you have leaders behaving as followers, because then this begs the question: who are the leaders following?
Boy,
We
is
don't
that-
know.
Boy, is that... I wonder that with Claudine Gay.
With Miss Gay, how
Yes.
much longer do you think she has at Harvard?
It's really interesting. I'm of two minds. Half of me thinks, 5 more minutes. But they've stuck by her this long, and they're going to really look bad if they ditch her.
Well, did you see Bill Ackman's recent tweet? I think this was...
Which one?
Oh, right. The
He's
recent,
going and going
Which
every-
recent of 1,000.
Yeah.
No, but he says, okay, look, in full disclosure, who knows if he's right and who knows if his source is right. He has it from highly placed sources that are Harvard Corp adjacent. Now, I just found out that Harvard's a corporation.
Oh, they call it the Board of Overseers.
The Board of Overseers.
Isn't that
yes,
Orwellian?
I'm extremely...
Yeah.
That they have asked her to resign, and she has refused, and has she's retained her own counsel and threatened litigation. And we don't know if this is true, but this is what Ackman says. So that would give credence to your theory that they can't afford to get rid of her. She's going to have to leave on her own, and who knows if and when that will happen.
What do you think?
I think she has no incentive to leave. I would like to think that even if she believes that she's totally in the right and that there's no reason for her to step down, if she truly loves the institution, and more importantly, if she truly cares about the students that she's intended to serve and to lead, she would spare Harvard any further shame, controversy, and disgrace and just step down. That's what I would hope. I don't know Claudine well enough to know if she will do that, but if I were in that position...
Do you know her at all?
I do not know. Never had the pleasure of meeting her, but I do know that if I were in that position, I think I would take my ego. This situation requires taking your ego, removing your ego, and just saying, okay, what's best for everyone else? And I think what's best is for Harvard to get out of the headlines as soon as possible, because as long as she stays there, Harvard's going to just stay in the headlines. And that's a shame.
You know what? I was listening to a commentator. She's on in Boston. Her name is Grace Curley. She's with the Howie Carr Radio Network. I discovered her, and I listen to her sometimes. She's really funny. One of the things that she said recently was, she said, I don't want Claudine Gay to resign. I want her to stay because I want to know what Harvard is. This is... Well, Harvard isn't a person, but this is who or what Harvard is. These are the kinds of people who and their actions that they reward. And so I want to look at an institution, and I want the people leading that institution to truly represent the institution. And she said, "Say what you want about Claudine Gay. I don't like her at all, but I'm glad that she's the president because it shows what Harvard is."
It shows that there's a cancer in Harvard.
Right.
But it's great that we've finally seen that.
Right.
But we can't let the cancer stay there.
I mean, I totally
agree.
Of course.
I think
agree.
it's a silver lining. I mean, I appreciate her perspective, but ultimately, if we're going to rehabilitate these schools, and like I said, I would, even if my son could get in, I would never send him there. But I still have this wistful sort of memory of Harvard. I would love Harvard to be what I think it used to be, and
What
could
it
be
can
again.
be,
What it
yes.
can be. I don't want to
Yes.
give up on these institutions.
I agree.
But we need to remove the cancers, and I think that, yeah, I'm glad that she's here now. I'm glad that this has become the cancer's been it's been exposed. But we need to take action now, and obviously not just at Harvard. I mean, Princeton's in horrible shape too. All of these. I mean, it's Stanford. Sure, you've seen what happened at Stanford Law. I think it was last year that, I think it was.
Which incident?
Yeah,
There's so many.
which
The
of
free
one?
speech one?
The free speech,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and the Ninth Circuit judges are just horrified by this is who these are the clerks we have to pick from. These are the judges from our future jurists, people who don't allow free speech and who want to shout down folks who disagree with them.
Right.
And it's just. But anyway, I still have hope and faith, because I am a person of hope and faith that we can salvage these institutions. I'd be curious to know, when you talk to your fellow alums, who are a year and a half out like you, what do they think about what's happening now? Do they support Claudine? Are they seeing the same problems we're seeing? I mean, if they are, that gives me even more hope. If they aren't, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I was very careful with who I chose as my friends. And also, it was kind of like a filter because I was starting sophomore year. I was very public. I was on Dennis's radio show.
Oh,
Dennis and I started a show out of my dorm room. So people knew
cool.
what I thought and what I was up to. So that kind of weeded some people out, but also had the effect of bringing some great friends in. So among my friends, we're all like, this is ridiculous.
Like-minded,
Claudine's got to go. But interestingly, I kind of look farther out, and I still talk with some of my peers, even if we're not close friends. And there's that same kind of resignation that I was talking about with
Really?
like they don't want to rock the boat. It's so as I said, it's so creepy. It's like they've learned to suppress their opinions, and like it's like, okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm pro Claudine if the corpse pro Claudine, but then if she resigns, I'm gonna support. It's like it's
whichever way the wind blows is where they'll go.
Yes, and
Interesting.
It's sad that at this age there are still so many of us like that, but it goes beyond just my age. It goes on and on and on.
It's deeper.
So I'm curious. How are you received among your former classmates, your former colleagues, at your old law firm? I mean, have they read the book?
Well,
and what did they say?
It's been a while since I've been in a law firm. So most of my peers are in entertainment, and Hollywood, you can imagine.
Is that, did I get it wrong? I said law firm. Is that?
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't been in a law firm in a long time. So
right.
I worked in business affairs at
a
major network, and as you said earlier, I since been working remotely where I have entertainment clients, studios, networks. I consult some writer producer clients, but that's my milieu. It's very progressive, and I would say that the bulk of my friends we talk about friends, frenemies, on social media are in entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Some are from Princeton and Harvard, that not in entertainment, but just, fellow alums. But I would say that by and large, I'm not received well when I'm sure my friends don't even know this book exists. It's it's not something, we're in completely different worlds, and I don't even advertise this on my personal Facebook page. So they don't even know about the book, but they know about the Monica who's in the book. They know about my thoughts because I'm pretty open about them on my Facebook page. And I think I've lost, I wouldn't say I've been defriended by a lot of people. I've definitely been defriended by some folks. But just recently we noticed we didn't get a Christmas card from a good friend of ours we've been in touch with for many years. He was a colleague of mine at MTV Networks. And for the first time, like my partner's like, this is weird. We didn't get a Christmas card. And then I realized they gave a Christmas card to someone else's house I went to. So clearly they sent cards this year, but we weren't on the list. And I have been increasingly vocal about my feelings about COVID, about
I was going to ask,
Black
what
Lives
specifically
Matter.
have you said that you think caused the Christmas card to not arrive?
I mean, there's been so many things. I would say, interesting. I think COVID was probably that was probably a bridge too far for a lot of people. Very early.
Isn't the jury out on that though now? Now?
No.
Yeah,
It's no. I don't think a lot of people are in the courtroom and listening to what the jury has to say.
True. They hear the verdict. They repeat the verdict if they like the verdict.
We hear the jury's going to come in with this verdict. We're just leaving now, and they don't actually listen to what the jury says.
Sean just said in my ear there are people still wearing masks.
Still
it's
people
true.
wearing masks in their cars.
In their cars. Yeah.
I mean, so what was really interesting about COVID is that living in Montana, we had a different reality evolving very, very early on.
With all the bigots.
All
the anti-vaxxers.
Not like our reality was, okay, so a state Montana's it's the fourth largest state in the country. A lot of people don't realize
Really?
that.
Wow.
It's just maybe a couple of hundred, maybe a couple of thousand square miles.
The fourth largest?
Yeah, it's right under California.
You mean?
No, in terms of land, in terms of
I
space.
thought you meant in population.
No,
wow.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah. We've got big cities everywhere. But we've got less than the population of Los Angeles, like maybe a third of the population of Los Angeles in a state the size of California, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to say is that incredibly spread out. We were social distancing long before
Right.
other people were. Um, just before COVID is what I meant. So when the virus, like my partner like was on COVID literally the moment it hit, was news was breaking out in China. She's like, I'm listening to this thing on NPR. This seems like it'd be a real thing. And I'm like, really? I mean, what is it? It's all the way over in China. And she's like, no, pay attention to this. So only because of her, I started paying attention.
Smart.
Yeah. And because of her, like before the lockdown started, she's like, I think we need to get some stuff from the store, like stock up a little. And I say all of this to make the point that we took it seriously at first. We were scared. I mean, it was
Of
a
course,
novel
of
virus.
course.
Who in their right mind would have
Of
been
course,
scared? Right.
yes, yeah.
But it didn't take us long to see that the reality that was being portrayed to us on TV every day by was the usual suspects: Fauci, Governor Cuomo, and I forgot who's the lady with the scarf, the Trump's
Dr. Burke?
Dr. Birx, yes.
Oh.
The Troika. It didn't take us long to see that reality wasn't quite matching up with the reality that we were seeing on the ground. So we unlocked in Montana like 6 to 8 weeks after the lockdown started. So by May, we were like living life pretty freely again.
Oh my God, by May.
By May, yeah, of 2020. I mean, there were still some things that were like, some social distancing. There were, some people were still masking. And I think the schools masked for like maybe the first 3 months of the year. But what we saw was that like people weren't dying in the streets. Because, I mean, if COVID were truly as dangerous as we were told, people would be like, you know what I'm saying? And,
Of course, we would
exactly,
know
we
more
would see it.
people. Yes.
But we would check the hospitalization rates, like, in Montana versus California, and in our very conservative, Flathead Valley versus Missoula, which is much more populated and much more liberal. They took COVID very seriously with the masking. And we would notice that there wasn't a substantial difference in hospitalization rates and infection rates. And we're like, this is so strange. Why would a virus, it's like you're talking about, is a virus smart enough to know when it's living in a certain location?
Right, yep.
So that was our first clue. And then I saw a Stanford study and a USC study that said, wait a minute, very early on, maybe like 7 weeks into the pandemic, that we're told that the mortality rate is like 3 or 4%, but it's looking more like it's like maybe 0.3%, substantially lower. So I posted this on Facebook, and the blowback I got: why are you minimizing this virus? Are you a murderer? This is just, why are you enabling murder? Don't you care about other people? So I think I lost a lot of friends.
You think it was COVID mainly?
I think it was COVID. And then when the vaccine came along and I said, I don't see the need to get vaccinated because we don't have pre-existing conditions. Our sons, we're healthy. Plus we've had COVID. Then there were people who were like, oh my God, you're an anti-vaxxer. One guy even accused me of killing Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island, Dawn Wells. She was one of the little Mary Ann, Ginger and Mary Ann. So she died during COVID.
I knew Sean was going to roll his eyes.
No.
He always makes references, and I don't know that. I read.
Okay,
I don't
all right.
watch
There's
anything.
something, a little pop culture you need to know about. So she's like Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island. She's like in her, 80s or whatever. So she died during COVID. This guy, a friend of me, tagged me and said,
Oh.
Mary Ann's death is on your hands. I mean,
Oh,
that's how
screw
bad it
him.
was. That's how bad
Sorry.
I mean, it's like, that's one of the few friends I've defriended. But yeah, I think it was like, my positions on,
That
things
makes
like
me
COVID.
so angry. Come on.
I know. And he was a lawyer, by the way. He was a lawyer who was that immature.
Oh my gosh. So you think it was COVID. Are there other takes that you
I
have
think-
been vocal about?
I think I haven't earned any friends with my stance on the transgender or gender ideology movement, shall we say. I mean, being gay, I've always had transgender friends. I've always, I think, been receptive and supportive of people who wanted to live alternative lifestyles or just alternative identities. But the thing is, I've always been on the same page with, back then in my day, to date myself, they were called transsexuals and transvestites, people who, if they had a gender affirming surgery, they were transsexuals, they were transgender. And if they like to, if they prefer to keep their, factory parts anatomy,
Right.
but like to, don other attire, they were transvestites. But they always knew that they were the sex they were born as. They might choose to present differently, but
Interesting.
transsexual, transvestite women never pretended that they were women it was almost like it's like I'm not going to say playing dress up, but they knew that they were living a life that wasn't a biological woman's life. They know
Would
they
they
weren't
call
really
themselves a woman?
I don't think
or
they
she
really
use
call
the pronouns?
themselves one. They might use she, but they wouldn't think that they were actually women. They wouldn't think that, they wouldn't imagine that they could give birth. They wouldn't refer to women as birthing persons. There was this in other words, there was this underlying acceptance of biological reality. And that was respectful for biological women.
Right.
We didn't feel displaced.
Right.
Lesbians, we weren't gaslighted into thinking that a man could retain a penis, and present himself as a woman and love other women and call himself a lesbian. We knew that a lesbian has a uterus, has a vagina, has factory part breasts. We knew this. And when I expressed this, anything approaching this on Facebook, or I was greeted as being transphobic. So all of these things add up, and I think people get a sense of me as someone who's, a troublemaker, not on the bandwagon. I'm conservative. I'm an enabler of white supremacy. I'm part of the establishment, whatever the establishment is now. So long story short, no, I don't think that I have a lot of close friends now in my my original friend circle from college and law school. My friend circle is it's shrinking. It's becoming like a puddle, and it's getting to be a lonely place. But I'm making new friends like you. I mean, let's just say my friend circle is changing.
It's interesting you say that, because as I said to you, when I was really public in college, and clearly continue to do so, it's had a way of shifting my friendships.
Yeah.
But I have found that there's such a camaraderie between people like us who think the same way.
The heterodox thinkers.
Yes, the heretics. Which is, by the way, so funny, because everything that you were just saying and everything that I say was accepted as totally mainstream and apolitical like 10 to 15 years ago. Yeah. I mean, saying that there are only two genders, was the least controversial statement.
Following the science.
I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, we need border protection. I say that all the time. I say, I'm proud to call myself conservative, but I don't really think what I have to say is particularly conservative. I just think I don't even think it's that political.
That's right. No, it shouldn't be.
Right. But putting that aside, I have found, my best friend is Dennis Prager, who's 75 years old, and his wife, who's 60 years old. You and your partner are new friends.
Oh,
seriously, you are. And I have one of Dennis's friends, his name is Robert Florzak. He's an artist. He's been on this show before. He sat right there and we looked at that screen and I said, what are 5 paintings that everyone should know about? And he came on and he, talked about those. He's one of my best friends. I have all of these
truly diverse friends.
Yes, truly diverse. Yeah. And it's because when we find people like each other who get it and who have been maligned unfairly, and who have a sense of appreciation and love for this country.
Yes.
It's this great draw that we have. And I'm just of the philosophy in life that I just want to collect great people. I don't care if they're young, old, black, white, Hispanic, I don't care. As long as they have my values, they're my friends.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I want to be around people who love this country. And that sounds that sounds really conservative. That sounds like something an old white man would say. But the older I get, the more I think there's so much that we've always taken for granted about what this country is, what it represents, what it means to be here. But the older I get, the more I respect those old dead white guys who created the ultimate starting up a country from scratch, trying to create bylaws, right, in the form of a constitution, trying to game every possible scenario for how to avoid the implosion of their new company, their country. And they did a pretty good job. And I look at what we've withstood: civil wars, Spanish flus, depressions, global wars, the civil rights movement.
Yep.
The women's movement.
9/11.
9/11. We have withstood so much, and it's because
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, an attack on our. It's because we have the bones of something really, really special. A free society with free speech. That's what's given us everything, all of the freedoms. It's allowed my mother, who literally, I kid you not, in Memphis, she was picking cotton to make spare change, not as a slave, but just because she couldn't get hired like at a lunch counter when she was a kid in the 50s. She picked cotton with her parents to make money, that was her spending money. And now looking at me sitting here with you, and like I'm living a life as a lawyer in Montana, with a bunch of white people who are supposedly so different from me. But this is how far we've come, and this is only possible in a country with the bones, the constitutional bones that we have. It's not possible in Sierra Leone. It's not possible in Russia. It's not even possible in Canada. Why? Because they don't have a constitution that allows people to speak as freely as we do. So, and if you don't have a constitution that allows people to speak freely, then you wonder what would have happened to Martin Luther King. If you can't, a lot of people think that free speech is now this sort of like, it's the weapon of white supremacy. It's the weapon of racists.
Princeton, your alma mater said so.
It's disgusting. But they forget what this weapon of white supremacy has done for people of color. Imagine
Totally.
Martin Luther King staging, the Selma, the sit-ins and the marches and just all of these not wonderful, but incredibly impactful events. Never would have happened if we didn't have the First Amendment. Never would have. So anyway, the older I get, the more I believe in these values, and I think it's so important, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, the people who seem to cherish these values most now aren't privileged white people. When I say the privileged white people, I'm talking about the people who come from these elite institutions
Right.
like Harvard. Yeah.
No, I hear you.
The true privileged. The people who really cherish what America means, a lot of times, first-generation Americans.
Yep.
Maybe second-generation Americans, but a lot of the immigrants who've come from countries that didn't have any of these, the constitutional bones that we have. And they know what authoritarianism looks like. They know what it smells like when it's coming. They see the signs, and they're trying to warn us. And a lot of them are, a lot of the people, if you really want to know what's going on in this country and what people are talking about, sit down grab an Uber driver in New York.
Oh, totally.
Or LA.
Totally.
And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be people who they've only been here a few years. And they came because they fought to get here through the front door, not the back door, and they respect what this country is, and they're concerned about what's happening to it.
I had someone write into me, and by the way, I just want to say as a note, we're going to talk about FAIR next because we have limited time.
Okay, limited time.
And I don't want to miss talking about that. But I'll just tell you quickly that there's someone, a community college student who wrote into me who listens to this show, and she wrote this email that really saddened me, and she said, Julie, I'm really lonely. And I can't, so many people I go to college with, they're so woke, and everywhere I turn, it's like pronouns and racism and this and that, and people hate America. And I just so wish that she could be sitting here having this conversation with us, because I feel that sometimes too. And I'm so blessed to be surrounded by a lot of people who think like I do. But the noise is so loud out there that we forget, like, this conversation, this is America. The conversation with the Uber driver. There are people like us out there who are grateful.
Majority.
Yes. And so just find your Monicas, everybody. Seriously, and they're out there, and that's why I'm friends with 75-year-old men, like a 32-year-old Danish woman who's concerned. Like, I have all these kind of hodgepodge people of friends, but we all have these values. I just want to say to everyone out there, they're there.
Yes.
You just got to look
more of us
a
than
little
you
bit.
think. We're not alone.
So let's talk about FAIR.
So FAIR is an organization that I joined about 1.5 years ago, and it was started about shortly after Black Lives Matter picked up steam in the wake of George Floyd's death.
And by the way, it stands for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism.
Yes. And so what we in FAIR are dedicated to, it's a multidisciplinary organization, but we're dedicated to fulfilling Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision. And it's a vision that I think a lot of people have he's fallen out of favor, I'll just be frank, in the last
It's crazy,
10 years.
isn't it?
People have forgotten. This man is synonymous with the civil rights movement, yet we don't talk about him anymore. But Martin Luther King believed in equality, not equity. And we in FAIR are firmly against intolerance and racism. But we want to eliminate these toxic influences with dignity and compassion and mutual respect for all human beings, all Americans, regardless of mutable or immutable characteristics. So in other words, not just diversity for Black people or transgender people or brown people, but equality for everyone. An equality that means making the table bigger so we can add chairs, not like, oh, you get to sit at the table, but it means someone else has to leave, which is essentially what equity is. Equity is equality of outcome. It's not equality of opportunity. So FAIR is an organization that actively works to create this kind of America, diversity with dignity and equality, and without division. And we do that with several pillars. Fair and legal. We represent people like Tabia Lee, who is a
guest on Timeless recently.
Recent guest, who was a Black woman, ironically, who was dismissed because she was standing up for the rights of her Jewish students at her community college and wanted to speak freely and was, just encouraging diversity of perspective. And that, of course, is now a semblance of white supremacy. Fair in the arts, speaking up for artists who are discriminated against with discriminatory hiring practices. Your guests may or may not be aware of this, but increasingly in Hollywood and in other branches of arts and entertainment, artists are being selected and hired based solely on the color of their skin. So, an actor might be, a costume designer might be selected or even only offered a position because they're Black or because they're non-binary. And sometimes positions are openly advertised that way, which is clearly a Title VI violation, but people don't care about this anymore.
You mean of the Civil Rights, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of open, just patently illegal practices that are happening in all aspects of our society, and they're not being addressed. And so FAIR steps into this space, and we're actively pursuing litigation. FAIR in medicine, we advocate. And you talked about COVID. Does the science really make sense behind COVID? Well, we advocate for doctors who practice ethical, evidence-based science. So that's what we are.
Real science.
Real science, not like manufactured science or distorted science. So yeah, that's what we do, and we're firmly committed to it, and our movement is growing.
Well, God bless you. I recently had on, as you said, Tabia, or is it Tabia?
It's Tabia Lee.
Tabia. Okay, good. Yes. Tabia Lee, who was a DEI director at De Anza Community College in Cupertino, California, as you say, was fired for standing up for Jewish students, for being pro-free speech. How controversial. And it was so cool to learn that she was working with you. And Tabia, or Dr. Lee, excuse me, and I had a very interesting conversation about the way that words have been co-opted and, diversity, for instance. And we've been doing it throughout this interview. We've been saying true diversity, true science.
Words are being redefined.
They're being redefined.
Yes.
And now you have to put a true in front of it in order for the real, definition of the word to come across. And so I have to tell you, when I read the name of your foundation against intolerance and racism, it's such a shame, but I hear those words now, and I don't think about real intolerance and real racism.
Yeah.
I think about the way that these words have come to me. I think of microaggressions.
Yes.
I think of, misgendering someone. But you are, what I love about FAIR is that you're truly standing up for the, I'm not going to say true meaning of these words.
We're
for the meaning.
Them. We're reclaiming the authentic.
And that's what Dr. Lee said, because I said to her, we read aloud her title at De Anza, and it was Director of Social Justice, Equality, and
Inclusion.
Inclusion, yes. And I said, when you were applying to this job, didn't that job title kind of stick out to you as something that would be, a woke person's position?
Right. And
she said no. She said, I look at those words and I really believe in the true meaning of them.
Right.
And so I'm so glad that you're reclaiming them.
Yes.
It's amazing that we even have to do that, reclaim. But I know that you are really standing up against true intolerance and true racism.
Absolutely.
In your work.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing. Thank you for saying that. And it's a very good point.
I can't believe that we're out of time. It's gone by
you
so
really?
fast. But I know that you said at the beginning that you only do these yearly trips now to Los Angeles, but we're gonna have to put in the calendar next year
We will.
this another part 3.
I'd love to come back because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff coming.
Oh my
I expect
gosh.
2024 to be like
A bumpy ride.
busy, bumpy, and eye-opening.
Yeah.
I think that we're in the midst of an awakening. Right?
Yes.
And I think that it's just going to it's just going to accelerate.
I
I
hope
expect a
so.
lot of big things and a lot of awakening in 2024.
I think October 7th changed things.
Oh, totally.
I think
Totally game
I think a
changer.
lot of people I've noticed especially a lot of my Jewish liberal friends
yeah.
are kind of going, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, this DEI stuff is pretty bad.
I often say that you can't change minds overnight. And sometimes I'll have conversations with people who disagree with me, and my partner will ask me, "Well, do you think you made any headway? Do you think you changed a mind? Do you think they're going to think, are they still looking at this issue the same way they were before you sat down and talked to them?" I'm like, it doesn't matter. What you want to do is plant seeds because
Yes.
people aren't necessarily ready to hear your message. I mean, but think about it. Could you have any conversation with anyone? I mean, as an intelligent person, you sit down with them and you walk away and like, oh, my mind's changed. No, that's not the way it works with anyone, intelligent or otherwise. It's a process. And you plant the seed and then you wait for the right conditions to unfold, whether the sunshine of an event or watering from another person, when people are directly affected by something, like, Bill Ackman and others have been affected by what's happening at Harvard. And then that's when the seed starts to bear shoots, and then things happen. But we should not expect that, because we didn't get to this place overnight. This has been decades of conditioning the
Of
way people
excellent
think,
sheep.
of excellent sheep. So it's going to have to be a deconditioning and a deprogramming process, and we have to be patient.
Yep.
We cannot be impatient with this process.
Thank you so much again for your time. It's
Oh.
so great to see you. I'm so honored to have you as a new
Pleasure
friend.
to be here.
And as a reminder to everyone, please get this book. I would say it's a Christmas gift, but we're a little late for that.
New Year's gift.
Or maybe we're very early, Start planning for next year. The Illusion of Division. Thanks again, Monica.
Thank you, Julie.
And thanks to all of you so much for listening. I'll see you soon. Take care.